Hello, welcome to this short session today. We're going to be talking about civil code terms that are very, very important for the state exam. It falls under the category of property in Louisiana. We're going to talk about immovables. We're going to talk about movables, component by incorporation, component by attachment. We're going to talk about movables by anticipation and separate immovables. Other terms like demobilization we're going to speak of, and incorporeal immovables. So in this session, these concepts and these civil code terms are very important for you to understand and have confidence and decipher. You can see they all kind of look the same. So hopefully we can clarify this in this short session. My name is John Enzing. I'm a licensed real estate instructor in both Louisiana and Florida. My specialty is to do one-on-one private tutoring with students like yourself to help them pass their state exam. It's for non-credited hours. It doesn't count towards your licensing credit. It's just private tutoring to help you with any details in common law, such as math and contracts and all those big categories, and also through the civil code. So if you'd like to schedule a one-on-one with me before you take your exam to clean up things, you can go to privateturingsession.com, and book you or schedule you some time. Or you can email me at john.enzing@gmail.com. Okay? All right, let's go ahead and dive on into this. So what are we talking about under the classification of property? And this is a continuation really under the first session I've done called property. We're going to talk about, again, immovables and movables and the definitions and terms and civil code that go with them. Remember, in Louisiana, an immovable is the same thing as and categorized as real property in common law. You can't move it. Okay, it's attached to the earth, whether it's man-made or natural, like a house man-made, a tree, or landscape being natural, it can't be moved. Now, in the state of Louisiana, under the civil code, the term real estate, remember in common law, real estate is land plus the improvement equals real estate. Okay, we call it immovables. Okay, so in real estate, the term real estate in Louisiana is land, everything attached to it. Okay, from the surface and below up to infinity, except, this is very important, it's less or except oil, gas, and other mineral rights. Okay, so that doesn't go with the term real estate. So that's excluded from that. Okay, now let's look at the land and its component parts. We're going to talk about component by incorporation, component by attachment. Those two terms are kind of hitched together, but they still have similar differences in them. We're going to look at demobilization, movable by anticipation, and then separate immovables. Okay, we're going to discuss all this in this short session here. Okay, now component by incorporation. This is personal property. In common law, we call it personal property. In Louisiana, we call them movables because it can be moved. Remember, when a house is built, okay, you got to bring in, if you want to call it, the pieces to the house. It's like putting a puzzle together. You got a box full of pieces. Consider that the components, the components to the house, and then when you assemble the house together, that's called by incorporation. Hence, it now converts to an immovable. It's like a puzzle. You got the box. You open the box. You pour the puzzle out. You spread all your pieces out. You've got individual. Think of it as movable pieces. When you assemble all those puzzle pieces together, you get one unit, and that's the picture of the puzzle. Okay. Same thing is the classification when it comes to component by incorporation. I'm getting the lumber, the nails. You can see here the picture of the Tyvek paper wrapped around the house, the roofing tar paper, all the windows, the framing of the house, the sheetrock inside, all these individual components, when they're incorporated together or assembled together, it now goes from movable things to an immovable. Okay, that's called component by incorporation. Just think of a puzzle, putting a puzzle together. All the individual pieces are movable things, and then when you build the puzzle, you got one, it's now an immovable. Now, component by attachment is a similar term in civil code, which really means in common law fixtures. So plumbing, electrical, the HVAC, the heating and air conditioning system, all these are considered component by attachments. Okay, so In common law, we call them fixtures. So with the plumbing, for example, not only do you have the pipes that bring in the water and the sewer lines that take all the sewer out of the house, but you got the component by attachment plumbing fixtures for the faucets, toilets, bathtubs, sinks. All these things are considered component by attachment or system for the plumbing or fixtures, okay? Same thing with electrical, lighting, all the outlets, everything that's associated with electrical, okay? Same thing with HVAC. You got the registers that the air comes out of, include all the duct work in the attic, along with the compressor outside. And so these are systems called component by attachment, and that's what makes up, in our common law, we call it fixtures, okay? Now, component by declaration and registry. These are movables that can be classified as immovables and vice versa. In other words, immovables classified as movables. That is a civil code law and principle in Louisiana that a homeowner or a landowner can do. Now, I'm going to be a little bit more specific. I got a picture I'm going to show you here in a couple of slides about component by declaration and registry. So, for example, a mobile home is sitting on a lot, right? You go up, it's on wheels. It may be a double wide or just a single wide mobile home. And you're going to buy, because you got some land, but as it sits on the lot, what happens? It's considered a movable. It's like an automobile going to a car lot or buying a motorcycle at the Harley Davidson shop. It's a movable. But what happens is when you bring it and have it delivered and they set it up, they actually set it up, you can declare that from a movable to an immovable. Okay, so it's going to become, when you register it in the courthouse, and the other term when we're looking at when it specifically talks about mobile homes is called immobilization, IMM. Immobilization is when you take mobile homes as movable, you put them on the land, you anchor it in, you plumb it in with water and sewer, you put electrical to it, and you make it, it's like building a home except you're just setting it up. And so you're taking a movable and you're making it into an immovable. It's called immobilization, but it's also a good example of component by declaration registry. But I got another good one I'm going to show you in a couple of slides, so we'll circle back to this. Now, continuing on, demobilization is nothing more than detaching a component part, okay? So from as little as taking a ceiling fan down, we call that severance in common law. When you take a ceiling fan, you take an immovable or a fixture or real property, making it into personal property in common law. Demobilization is the same thing. We're detaching and making it into a movable, okay? But it's more so in Louisiana if you sell a mobile home. Let's say you own property and you got a mobile home on it, and you now want to build a house, for example. So you want to get rid of the mobile home and sell it. Well, through the term demobilization, as long as it doesn't hurt any rights to any third parties, you can sell the mobile home and keep the land. You're de-immobilizing it from an immovable, converting it to a movable. And as little as making a ceiling fan, pulling it down, you're doing the same thing. Now, incorporeal immovables. Remember, the term corporeal means you can feel, touch it. Incorporeal, you can't see it or touch it. Those are rights and interests in a thing. We talked about incorporeal. So incorporeal immovables, remember, you can't move it, we refer to as servitudes, okay? You got a right or interest in someone else's land. In common law, we call that what? We call it an easement. Remember, the pertinent easement, easement by necessity, commercial easement and gross, a personal easement. The right to use someone else's land is an interest or ownership, not ownership, but just an interest to use someone else's land, right? Incorporeal, you can't see or touch it. What is your interest in that immovable? We call it servitudes, okay? Common law term is easements. Now, let's move to movable things. You remember I told you I was going to circle back. Let me clean this up for you real quick. We talked about movables by anticipation, separate immovables. What I was wanting to see is component by declaration and registry. Remember, we talked about these are movables that can be classified as immovables and vice versa. Okay, so let's circle back. I'm going to show you another example. Remember, Louisiana, you need to make note of this. Louisiana is better known as an agricultural oil and gas state. Okay, that's the primary industry for Louisiana, is agriculture. So look at this combine in this picture. It's called a combine. It's a big farm equipment. Let's say you own this property, this land here, it's 500 acres, and you are a farmer that harvests wheat. This is wheat, and you harvest wheat every year to bring it to market. That's your livelihood for your family, and you get paid for it. This combine can run you as high as $150,000. These are big, giant pieces of equipment, and you can see it can harvest very quickly, and it's very efficient to get your harvest to market. Well, it's kind of hard to finance for like a car loan, 5 or 10 years, 150,000. So in Louisiana, we can take these combines, which is here a movable, right? It's not an immovable, it's like an automobile, and we can register it by declaring it and registering it in land records. We can convert it to an immovable. And once it's declared an immovable, when you sell your land, that combine goes with the deed, okay? Goes with the contract of sale. And so you've converted it from a movable to an immovable and made it part of the land. And the nice thing about it is you can encumber this or refinance it under a mortgage. And so now you can get a 15 or 20 or 30-year mortgage on this particular piece of farm equipment because it is an immovable, okay? So by declaring it and registering it as an immovable, you can take equipment like this and declare it an immovable, because in the state it is immovable. A big example of that would be an RV home. You know, these big Class A RVs. A lot of these retired folks that live in Florida, they'll take these RVs and they'll make it their home because they permanently can put it on a slab in an RV park. And they'll actually convert it from a movable or personal property, actually put it and make it an immovable by declaring it in land records. Okay, so that's available. That's called declaring and registering. Okay, for a movable to an immovable. Now, moving on to movable things. Remember, we define that as a chair, table, something you can move. Incorporeal movables are rights and obligations and actions towards a movable thing. If you own stock, bonds, any type of investment, that would be an example of an interest ownership in something that you can't see or touch, okay? Like stocks or bonds, investments. Now, in Louisiana, you want to know these two terms, movable by anticipation and separate immovables, okay? So movables by anticipation are unharvested crops, ungathered fruits. Again, look at the picture. And you see the combine is harvesting this wheat. Well, before the harvest season comes, it's growing. And while it's in the ground, it's going to remain personal property or a movable. And it's in the actual title of the term. Movable, it remains movables while it's growing by the anticipation of harvesting, which now you can see it's no longer there. It's made, it's pulled out of the ground. So it becomes a movable. So movables by anticipation, crops growing. Remember, Louisiana is an agricultural state. Crops growing in the ground is not an immovable. It is a movable, but for the anticipation of being harvested. Okay, that's movables by anticipation. Now, the other term you want to look at is separate immovables. Okay, separate immovables. Separate immovables is buildings or standing timber. Remember, standing timber you don't harvest in 1 year. That takes 25 years to grow before it can be harvested. So they consider that a separate immovable. So if you lease property from me, let's say you lease a lot from me and you put a trailer on that lot, that's called a separate immovable. You own the immovable as separate to yourself. I own the land that I'm leasing to you. You're putting your trailer, anchoring it in, you're plumbing it into the water and sewer, you're putting electricity to it. And so it's separate, immovable to you because I'm the landowner. Same thing with standing timber. It's separate, immovable. You could lease land from me and plant pine trees, and then 25 years later, harvest them. They're considered separate immovables, okay? Remember, they belong to someone other than the landowner. All right, listen, I hope you enjoyed today's session. When it comes to movables, we talked about component by incorporation, component by attachment, movables by anticipation, and separate immovables. Again, if you need some help and you want some private tutoring, go to privateturingsession.com, privateturingsession.com. Okay, good luck on your exam. And if you need help, again, I hope to see you. Bye-bye now.